Hi, I'm Jeanette Sutton,
And I'm Eddie Bertola.
and we welcome you to another episode of The Alerting Authority. And as always, we encourage you to subscribe, follow, listen, and most importantly, participate in these podcasts. We want your questions, concerns, ideas, problems, pain points, success stories, so we as alerting authorities can better do our jobs and make our communities safer. This episode is sponsored by The Warren Room. It was launched in 2023 to serve as a bridge between academic research and practical application, where we translate roughly 70 years of research from the social sciences to provide insights on evidence-based guidance for emergency alerts. We focus on improving the effectiveness of short-form messages such as wireless emergency alerts, and we help practitioners to design clear, actionable warnings that reduce public uncertainty and motivate protective behaviors. One of our key professional services is the Warning Bootcamp, where we help practitioners to develop their own templates for different kinds of alerting scenarios, including natural disasters, technological disasters, hazardous materials, missing persons, and all clear messages, and help you to be prepared so that when it's time to issue your alerts, you have the confidence to do so in a timely manner and your public can respond effectively. So please consider joining our next boot camp, which is occurring in July, the 20th through the 24th, and visit us at thewarrenroom.com to learn more.
We have someone really special on our show, and it's someone that you and I have both worked with for actually, I think, a long time, and we've known. He's been in the field. I will give you his bio and then I'll say his name, but you'll probably guess because not only is he on the camera, and you can, if you're watching on YouTube, you already see who it is. Um, but it's someone, if you're following missing endangered persons and advancements, you either know the program or you will get to know the program because they are really pushing the envelope when it comes to the way that they're doing messaging. So I'll just say it is Tim Williams. And so, hello. And Tim serves as the program manager for the New York State Missing Persons Clearinghouse. He leads efforts to support investigations, improve response protocols, and strengthen how critical information is shared with the public. He has over 17 years of law enforcement and criminal justice experience. He began his career, like me, as that basic patrol officer, and investigator before joining the Clearinghouse in 2013. Since then, he's helped develop training programs, coordinate cold case reviews, and just build systems to rapidly distribute information during a missing person incident. So today, he continues to focus on advancing investigatory practices, standardized responses, and also throwing it in there, making really big strides in alert and warning message development. And that's, I think, one of the things we're going to focus on. So a big welcome to Tim. Thank you for being on.
Tim, we're
Oh,
excited to
thanks for
see you
having me.
today. This is great. I am thrilled that we get to have this conversation because I have learned so much about the process of alerting for missing persons by working with New York State Division of Criminal Justice Missing Persons Clearinghouse. It's a big mouthful, and it is
It is.
it makes sense that it's so big because your job is really, really big. And the cases that I see posted to social media where you have these solved cases, these weekend-long events where you're finding people, it's just amazing to me, the work that goes into what you do every day. And I'm thrilled that you've been also working on how to communicate with the public to help them to be more involved in your process. So welcome to our show.
Thank you. Again, thanks for having me.
So you are going to probably hear little stories throughout the show and everything else because we have worked together for a long time. And honestly, even before we started recording the podcast, it's fun to catch up and
It
hear
is.
about all the amazing things that are happening. So I'll start it off with a first question. And this is really going to be a get to know you question because I really want our listeners to understand who you are and a little bit more about the program because it is different in New York than it is where I came from in California, or maybe different than Georgia, North Dakota, or wherever. And we acknowledge that every jurisdiction is unique. But for those that aren't familiar with the program, can you give us a little bit of an overview of it, how it relates to the state police and the role that you play?
Sure. Yeah, so like Jeanette said, the New York State Missing Persons Clearinghouse falls within the State Division of Criminal Justice Services. That is our agency that we're within. And really, our role in the state is we are a 24/7 support service for law enforcement, for social services, and left behind family members in the investigation and the search for missing persons. Um, we have been around for a long time, far longer than I've been here. We've been established since 1987 and started in the missing and exploited children fields exclusively, and then in 2011, with some updated legislation, morphed into the Missing Persons Clearinghouse, covering missing vulnerable adults, college students, and missing children. Just to kind of give you more background on what we do beyond alerting, which we'll talk, I'm sure, plenty of about in the next few minutes. Um, we operate a 24/7 hotline. So any law enforcement agency who needs support can contact us 365 days a year. Um, our staff are all former law enforcement officers who have been in the field, who have done investigations, who have worked missing person cases. They bring those skills to our office, and we're able to support that work from our role in the state. We cover the entire state, from New York City out to Buffalo to the Adirondacks. We cover anywhere and everywhere, and really, we're doing analytical work behind the scenes, trying to help investigators develop leads. We are statutorily required and responsible for all the law enforcement training in the state. So our office makes sure that our law enforcement officers in New York are as up to date as we can keep them with missing person investigations, technologies, available resources. And really, that also morphs into our public outreach. We do community events. We have prevention programs like our internet safety program, where we go out and try to educate the public and the youth in New York on, being safe, using the internet safely. And again, obviously, we can make those connections, how that impacts missing person cases, that potentially come up. So, as you mentioned, Eddie, a big component of it that I haven't covered is our alerting. New York has 6 missing person related alerts. We have Amber Alert, which probably most people are aware of. We have an abducted adult alert program, an Amber for adults, and Blue Alert. Those 3 alerts are actually administered by the New York State Police Investigative Services Unit, who are partners of ours. They, for lack of a better term, they push the button on those alerts. They make the decision. They work on the programs of those. The Clearinghouse, we have the 3 additional alerts of a missing child alert, a missing college student alert, and a missing vulnerable adult alert. Those alerts are designed to make sure that we're covering all the vulnerable populations that could potentially go missing that an Amber Alert may not cover an abducted adult. An Amber Alert needs some level of an abduction to be issued. There needs to be, a reasonable suspicion that a child or adult's been abducted. But what about the 6-year-old with autism that wanders out in the middle of a snowstorm? That's where our missing child alert comes in. That's where our vulnerable adult alerts come in for, an elderly individual believed to have dementia who's wandered off or driven off and is at risk. So what's unique with New York is that the alerting is split between 2 different agencies. As you said, we work very closely with our partners at the state police. Victoria Marticello is the senior investigator and the Amber Alert coordinator. We talk, I think, multiple times a week to bounce the cases off each other, make sure we're on the same page about different cases. So when we're activating alerts, the consistency is there. But it is definitely unique in the sense of not a lot of states split that alerting authority between the 2. So, we're a very a busy unit, unfortunately. I always say, we don't want to be busy with missing person cases, but we are. And we're pretty proactive with our alerting to make sure that we're providing those resources.
No, I love it. And again, for those in a similar situation where you have split duties or split responsibilities, I would hope that you guys have a relationship like they have in New York. And Victoria, who is now the Amber Alert coordinator for New York, amazing person, and as previous coordinators have been as well. And it's one of those, you need to have that working relationship. And so I applaud you for keeping that. Um, and it's one of those, as long as you guys have that same like purpose in mind, I think you can work through anything. And it's great having good partners
Yeah, I mean
for sure.
that has been the key to the success of the alert program here in New York State as a whole between the two agencies. You know, being able to pick up the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning and have that conversation with someone of here's the facts, which way do we want to go with this to make sure we know which agency's, taking the lead, um, has been such a benefit. And that has been the case really from day one for me, from coming to New York, has been that relationship. And it is so key, because in the few times where communication has been a challenge or has faltered, we've seen the result of that, where there's been confusion on the end where it's go out. So yeah, it's drastically important, and I'm grateful for the partnership we have with the state police for sure.
And that's really good because I want you to go back in the wayback machine, the quote unquote, like go back in time for
Sure.
when you when you first, and you can go back to when you started in law enforcement yourself or when you joined the unit. Obviously, because if I were to ask you how things are right now, I know the picture I'm going to get, but I want to look at kind of what led to this. And from when you started, were you able to recognize some of the bigger challenges that existed as far as communicating with the public, or just whether it's operational, investigative, when it came to missing person cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I came to New York, I was a police officer in Maine, like you had stated, Eddie, and law enforcement, in every state operates differently, and I can still remember the very first what I would consider major missing person case I handled, as a law enforcement officer. Two juvenile youths went missing. All we recovered was their two bikes on the side of the road. There was all these unknowns, getting resources. And I remember thinking at the time, you know, how can I get this information out to all the public that have been driving around and that may have seen? And we really didn't have that resource at the time. And fast forward to, 2013 when I came to New York, I walked into the clearinghouse going, holy cow, you know, we have the capability here in New York. Um, there's these alerts that are available, there's these tools available, but they were inefficient at best. I will say that. For us at the time when I first came to activate an alert for us, it took us about close to 2 hours from start to finish, generating content, getting the posters ready, getting information, sending out a ton of emails. Um, you know, Technology was limited at the time with different, we were using a website with data fields that we had to populate to try to generate this poster. To now, I think it was 2017, we were able to, through an IT project, automate our alert system and increase those efficiencies where we can activate an alert in about 10 minutes now. If you have the information to us, we plug it in, few fields, and alerts, notifications spit out. Um, the advances in technology and the advances in capabilities and the openness, I will say, of our previous program manager, Cindy Neff, and our staff, uh, the ability to look at where can we improve and continue to do that has just brought us, I don't want to say ahead of the game, because I never feel like we're ahead of the game, but we're definitely, trying our best to stay up with it, to make our program, as most efficient as it can be. Uh,
Yeah, I know that
it's hard
Jeanette and I,
in how far it's come.
yeah, Jeanette and I reference your program a lot, with the advancements you guys have made. And it's funny, I know I'm teeing all this up because Jeanette's going to go into all of the the specifics for messaging, because that, for anybody who's listening, like, you want to listen and hear all the stuff that's been happening. Um, I want to just lay one more foundation kind of question out there. And again, what you guys have heard before, we've worked with this agency and with the state police for a while, and they are amazing programs. They've gone through some pretty significant updates in how their policy or program operates, especially around messaging. And I just want to kind of give you a chance from your perspective, Tim. What's it like leading that effort? And again, we had Cindy Neff, who was there before you, who did a lot. But I'm guessing this wasn't you just to wake up and you're like, hey, let's go through some pretty drastic changes on how we do things, how we say things. For those that are listening that may want to do something like this, what's it like?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. Fortunately, I'm going to say fortunately because it is all about I want to say attitude, but the culture of the unit. I'm fortunate that everyone that's working in our unit wants to be there, at least from my perspective. Um, you know, they everyone is looking for ways to improve. I feel like it's almost every week that even some of our mainline staff are coming with ideas and say, "Hey, what if we do this? This sped this process up for me." We use digital checklists. And I just had a staff member come to me with a new approach to our checklist that would speed up, navigating it. Great. Um, the challenge I think comes in, and I think it comes into anyone that works in a profession where it's repetitive in nature, is that staff get comfortable with knowing what they do. Let's say we're activating a missing child alert. Our staff are comfortable in, okay, these are the steps I have to take. We have it templated out. We have everything checklist, so we make sure we cover every step of the way. Any change means that we have to rewire that person to now make those changes, and so that has always been a challenge. Not because of necessarily staff pushing back on them, but more of that muscle memory or that repetitive nature. Now we're changing it, and I think I know we'll talk about what went into a lot of the changes that we've made recently, but I think the biggest thing is that we've been able to include every level of our staff all along the way. So whether it is getting input from them, um, or relaying new information, new approaches, you know, research that we've been, you know, made aware of, keeping them up to date and keeping them, this is why, giving them the why we're doing that, has made that a lot easier because they're bought in, they understand why we're making the change. And when it comes down to, doing it, um, they're prepared for it.
I love it. I'm going to pass it off to Jeanette, who I know is super excited because we're going to jump into the specific messaging. I was thinking of all these things. I'm like, and I'm going to hand it off to like I was going to say, magistrate of messaging, but then it was going to be like the wizard of wording, or I got to think of something, but truly, um, this has been fun. And so, Jeanette, let's jump into this one.
Okay, well, I have one other name that you can use because I read about this. It's called a word stylist.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I like
a
that.
word
Yes.
stylist. So if you write messages, you are word styling. It's like a verb. Anyways, thank you. That's I love getting to work on this, and getting to work with the Clearinghouse in New York was the first time that I got to work directly with an organization that addresses missing persons messaging, which is not the norm for people who work in the disaster space. In fact, this particular area of messaging is the one that most emergency managers are like, I'm not sure that those messages should even be going out over our system, the wireless emergency alert system. And yet, by working alongside of the Clearinghouse, I've not only seen the incredible dedication and the importance of these alerts, but it's given me this whole new thought around frequency of messaging and targeting those messages more carefully so that the local community can be part of that response and recovery effort, which actually can create greater trust and greater community feelings of being part of something. And so there's these potential benefits that I think that we have not been considering in the alerting space when we think about missing persons alerts, because we're so concerned about over alerting and people opting out. And yet the work that New York has done has been, they've thought so deeply about that particular issue of over alerting and have worked very, very intentionally to make this so that their messages are very clear and complete and targeted and specific. And so that's all prelude to asking Tim about his messaging. I'm just so excited because this is, I think, the program that is really setting the bar for the nation because of the work that you have done. So before the updates that I just talked about, little glimpses, can you describe the way the messaging used to be done even 2 years ago, and what kinds of words or formats were commonly used? And did you think they were effective? And why?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting to look back and say, like, how are we alerting before? And, I think if I had to describe it best, it was just boilerplate messaging. And something that kind of jumps out at me, and I've relayed this to some of our staff, is that, we use checklists, and we will continue to use checklists because that makes sure we're hitting all the key components of our alerts and we're doing what we need to do. But alerts are beyond a checklist. The message that is going out isn't a checklist. It isn't a template. It's a skill. So instead of us looking at it as, I need to train my staff to complete a checklist, they can do that. I need to train the staff on a skill, which is message creation, message sending, to try to improve effectiveness. So the way we were sending them before is, what I would say kind of more of this official language, using, very standardized message templates that left little detail or left out a lot of detail, only gave little detail. Used very, last seen, date and time, last location, date and time, last location, a very generic physical description a lot of the times. And, that was about it. We were really just keeping to very static facts. And the idea that we had, which I think is the idea that a lot of people have in our world, is we wanted to set up a program where, Jeannette, you come to our office someday and we all disappear and alert needs to go out. You could pick up our manual and our checklist. You could copy and paste the template and you could issue that alert without ever working for an hour in our unit. That was the idea that we felt like we had to be operating under. And now, through, especially in the last 2 years, working with both you and Eddie on our messaging and our targeting and all those things, the realization of, no, you need to have a skill set. You need to have the understanding of what makes a message effective. What are the key components of a message, given the facts and the circumstances that we've been given, to make a message the most effective it can. One of the questions I think all alert originators have when they hit send, which is that big moment right before you click send of going, okay, did I get it all? Am I being the most effective? Is we don't have real time, or even if we debrief later, of just how effective that message was. Yes, we get the statistic on how many people it was sent to. Great. We get the feedback, especially if the alert was directly responsible for the safe recovery or the recovery of the individual, we get that, well, it was effective for at least one person that called that tip in, or, we can base it. But what we aren't able to easily track is, of the people that got it, how many actually paid attention to it. Maybe they didn't call a lead in, but were they looking? How many people, we can see website clicks, but we don't know how many unique individuals that was. There's all these things that are questions. So, when you ask how effective we were, I wish I knew. I want to say we're as effective as we were doing at the time, but, in my mind, where we are now sets us up to be the most effective we've ever been before, especially focusing in on, instead of those boilerplate templates, we are crafting or styling a message that we can at least, or we're making our best effort at making it the most effective. So that shift in mindset, I think, beyond shifting of our language, beyond shifting of our templates, was, I think, a big shift for me and a big shift for our unit of, we're not going to tell you this is the wording to put out. We're going to give you the concepts of, here's some key components we need to make sure we're hitting. We're no longer just copying and pasting into a message template. We have the basis to save some time, but we're going to make sure that we're including the factors that make this message as effective as we can be. So it's been, I've been really grateful for our staff. They've completely embraced that mindset, and are really, it's showing, because, we peer review our alerts, and we look at our posters, and we look at our templates, and, we're what I've seen is that we're really been brought up to speed with the work we've been doing.
Yeah, well, it was amazing to watch your staff and the state police all working together to design messages, and the process that you went through of making decisions about the language that's used for different kinds of aspects that are included in messaging. Thinking about, how do you describe the characteristics of the vulnerable person, being very cautious in not identifying them with a particular condition,
Right.
so that you're giving them privacy. You're helping to give them that the ability to maintain. I don't know what the word is. Help me here.
Yeah.
It's just, you, you're helping them because you're so cautious about the way you're thinking about talking about them in a message. I don't know. That wasn't a good. I mean, we might want to cut that part
Yeah.
out, because I
No,
can't come up
I
with the
like
right
it.
word.
no. Well, I think you're hitting a key. I think you're hitting a key component here that we haven't really talked about, which is, and it goes back to also where we were 10 years ago to where we are now, is control of your message or control of your alert after you've hit that button.
Right.
10 years ago was way more controlled. Sharing across social media was there, but it wasn't being, reshared as much. It wasn't being reposted. We weren't dealing with, which an issue we're dealing with now is, scammers actually using images from different missing person cases and creating a fake missing person case and posting it on social media to try to generate people to click a link or go to. That wasn't as much of an issue 10 years ago. So we weren't as focused on looking at what happens after this person's located. What is the footprint on the internet after we say it's down? We can control our links. We can control our websites. We can send out our cancels. But we have seen it so many times. We have been contacted by someone that says, hey, you guys put an alert out for me 10 years ago. It had, indications of my mental health status at the time. It's all over the internet still. And so we really, in the last couple of years, looked at, is it necessary? What information is necessary to help locate this individual? Because that's really what we're doing. to go down another sidetrack to something you said earlier, Jeanette, is that missing person alerting is so different than disaster or emergency, because in those situations, you're alerting the public to take action to protect themselves, right? Generally speaking, lumping them all together. In missing persons, it's actually us asking the public to help us. It's not a situation that they need to do something. We're trying to get them to want to do something. And I think when we focus in on what information is best suited for that person receiving that message to go help us, if it's not needed and it's just information that's a fact or circumstances, then we don't need to put that out there, because then it reduces the amount of times that's going to follow someone. So yeah, to your point, that's been a major focus the last couple of years of removing any medical diagnosis, removing any language directly related to a mental health situation at the time, and more focusing on if the person's endangered or not. We've decided on a few situations. For example, someone with autism. We do include that because the public generally understands what comes with that. And the behavioral characteristics of an individual with autism, vary widely. Everyone is unique. And so, that helps us at least get some information about that individual in a knowing sense for the public, without taking tons of characters to explain all the individual characteristics. We hit the highlights and go from there. But yeah, that's been definitely a focus for us, is after we push send, even when we cancel, that's being circulated still. So
Yeah. I think one of the words I might use is giving people the ability to retain some dignity after
that's perfectly put.
being part of a message that goes out to a whole community or beyond their community. And I think one of the phrases that you all have identified is the person may appear confused and in need of medical attention, which I think is just such a kind way of stating we need to help this person because they need our help, and asking people to reach into their empathy and say, yeah, I can do that. I can look out my window and see if the person's walking by.
Right.
I can check my car. I can check
Right.
my shed.
Yep.
And it's, it's reaching out and saying, please help us.
Yeah, that is definitely the key, is trying to relay that message in a small amount of characters to that person receiving it, that this person is endangered enough that the state is issuing an alert to locate this individual. We need to give them enough to understand a characteristic that they're looking for, an action item. We're going to put in there, go, check your property, check your sheds, check your pools, all those key things depending on the case. But it's really trying to drive home that, this person does need help. It's not, we try to avoid, activating on cases that don't warrant activation. We have other resources for that. We want the public to understand, if you're getting this, there's a reason, and we need your help there.
Yeah, thank you. And I knew we'd eventually find the words to describe what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay, so there's been some major changes in how the Clearinghouse communicates. Previously, there was some focus on alert names that were included, and you've moved away from that. And part of that is due to the research that was presented as part of our work with you. Can you talk a little bit about how research has informed the decisions that you made in including names and other changes that you've made?
Well, I think what it did is it filled some of the holes that I mentioned earlier of, we pushed send and we only had some data to look at to say how effective we were. And looking at the research, Jeannette and Eddie, that you guys brought to us working with you the last few years, to say, well, here's some actual scientific research that was done on a social level to say, here's what the public engaged with, here's what they didn't. Here's what the public gave for feedback when they received these messages. Here's what has been shown to be effective versus just what we think is. And I think that exercise allowed us to look at, okay, now that we have this information, what one of the topics we talked a lot about is vehicles. Well, we used official language a lot in previously, where we would put make, model, and it's like, well, most people don't know the difference between a Toyota Corolla and a Toyota Camry, so why are we focusing in on that model name? Well, that's just wasted characters. So let's rephrase how that is. So we're looking for a car, a Toyota car, Toyota sedan, giving more of that, the vehicle style. I think what it allowed us to do is take that information and then re-examine all of our alerts, all of our templates individually, one by one, and say, okay, given what the public is engaging with, are we sending alerts that prompt that? And what we saw a lot of times is, no, we have to make changes. We were using jargon, that whether it was law enforcement jargon or what I would say is like alert jargon that has been used previously to, instead of saying last seen walking, we were using on foot. Well, for us, on foot makes sense, but not everyone it does. And realizing that and then going back and looking at each alert individually, we were able to make those changes in language. Where I think we had issue is that this whole, like I said, we have 6 different alerts in New York. I would guess, and this is a guess, that if we polled the citizens of New York to give us an understanding of which alerts are available and what do they mean and what are they for, most people are going to know an Amber Alert, because that's a well covered, nationwide. There's Amber Alerts. Each state has different, sub alerts or different alerts like we do. When it came down to naming the names of the alerts and how they're issued, in my opinion on it, it makes more sense to condense those down and to have targeted alerts that cover the populations we need to, the circumstances we need to. But a lot of times, especially for us, that gets challenging for that is that some of these alerts are created under legislation. The ability to rename or reissue isn't something that we can just decide. And so as much as we'd like to from programmatically say, okay, we're only going to a missing endangered person alert and it's going to cover these different populations, we in the end were able to make the changes on the language side and make, in the effort to make our alerts more efficient. But we still are using the multiple different alert names when it's issued. Now, again, we have some flexibility in our language that allows the work with that, but the programs themselves are still separated out. So there are still those challenges that come into play in our world where we can make changes where we can, and some things are just unfortunately where they need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about the research, and I brought several studies and shared them with the Clearinghouse and with the state police, and it was eye-opening for all of us. This was new research because it has only been done in the last few years, and Lauren Kane was the lead on those studies. And for anyone who's listening who wants a freshly minted PhD looking for a job, Lauren will be coming back from her work in France shortly. She examined all of the messages that have ever been issued for missing persons and looked at their qualities and the characteristics included and helped us to really zero in and say, these ones fit what we know is useful in an alert that is designed for disaster. And those characteristics are the same kinds of things that are useful for people to understand and believe and make a decision about helping in this kind of an alerting context also. And so from there, after looking across all of those different messages that have ever been issued, I mean, there were so many questions that started to emerge. And then she also helped us to do an experiment. We're looking at people's understanding of those different alert names, like you were talking about, whether or not people know the difference between a green alert or a blue alert or an amber alert or an Ashanti alert. And the experiments that we did, the public don't understand the language that's used, that policing jargon that you were talking about, and the importance of using the plain language,
Right.
so that people can engage and they do understand the population that you're talking about, and also what they can do to be helpful. And these are studies that honestly we didn't have them before, and so all of the work that missing persons clearinghouses across the country are currently doing, you can't be faulted for not knowing how to do it differently if no one's been able to show you. And so
Right.
now that this research is coming out and it can inform people's practices, I'm really grateful that New York is taking that and implementing it as the research is getting published also.
Yeah, it's been really beneficial to us. And I will say that, we've just now kind of transitioned into our most recent changes, our most recent templates. And I would love to be able to look at, moving forward, look at, okay, these messages are going out and get selfishly, I'd like to get it for New York alone, but obviously on a national level as well. But, the effectiveness of having all these different alerts and sending these messages, in the end, we're trying to get across what I said before. This person is endangered, regardless of what the alert name is. If we're issuing an alert, there's an endangerment level here that we need to find this individual, whether it's a child or an adult, whatever the situation is. If we're issuing that alert, regardless of the name of it, we'll help find this person. And I think with the push that I've started to see nationwide of adding more alerts, the idea is we need more alerts for more populations. The what you're talking about, Jeannette, is that might be great in theory, but it's not effective in the public sense, and if it's not effective in the public sense, and with the research that you're doing and looking at that, we need to focus in on, let's make sure our alert programs cover all populations, regardless of whatever the demographic might be, whatever it is. Make sure we've got every population covered, and every potential scenario, which is impossible, but the big endangerments covered, where we're not going to be stuck saying, well, we don't have an alert for that, but still be able to push those messages out, without confusing the public on some other named alert. That's where the focus, I think, needs to be, is looking at, like you're saying, that effectiveness versus the title of an alert.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think is really important, because you're right. We do see new named alerts coming out all the time, and it's not just for missing persons, it's for other kinds of events also, which I can only imagine how confusing that will be if that's the hazard name for in a message. If it's not plain language, people just won't understand what's happening.
So can I just put it out there and say, if you're thinking about creating a new alert and a new name, stop it. Stop. Don't do it unless you talk to us first, okay? Like, there was one I heard that was being talked about called the brown alert, and it was going to be for essentially a boil water notice, so that your water is not good. And so it was going to be called a brown alert. And I'm just thinking to myself, plain language, folks. And I know we preach that all the time here. So yes, that is my statement. Don't do it anymore, folks. Just talk to us, plain language. You got all the tools you need to make it happen.
Yeah, I think I'll just add here, and this is just, opinion of mine, is that I think sometimes we focus in on, and I say we, as government agencies or as alerting authorities or whatever the role, I think sometimes we get stuck in looking at, well, there's this possible scenario that we're not addressing, or this population might be, we might not have an alert for that, or there might be not a program dedicated to that. I think the bigger shift would be, well, make sure you have the capability to activate, but it's really focusing in on the public outreach, the media outreach, the alert receiver awareness that, hey, we have these alerts and we've got everyone's covered here. We've got these scenarios covered. Here's what you might receive and why. And if we have to do that on 10 different alerts, that's difficult. But if we can, to public awareness on 3, 4, 5, I'm going to say 6 because that's what we have. It's a little bit more manageable to explain why someone is getting something and what we're looking for them to do. So it's really, I think that focus is so important in the world that we're operating in.
Whole questions just to round everything out. This is a memory that I have. I remember walking in to your office building right there in Albany, and you had talked about, and this was when Cindy too talked about inviting the different stakeholders, which is a big umbrella term. And if you were to say, hey, invite your stakeholders, unless we really define what that is, I mean, that could mean 2 people, could mean more. I've only had one other experience doing this for the number of years I've been doing it, and it was in American Samoa, where I walked into a room and they literally had every potential stakeholder that was involved in this. And then there's New York, who I would put right alongside that. I was very impressed with the work you guys did. And when we say stakeholders, because I think this is important, what does it mean to you? And what kind of like, why'd you guys invite everybody? I loved it. But like I said, I'm used to having like 2 people in there. There were quite a few.
Yeah. Well, I think what you saw is what has been kind of the cornerstone to our alert programs from as long as I've been here, is that we have always had a very strong alert partner committee, working group, stakeholders, whatever you want to call it, whatever name you want to throw onto it, that meet regularly. So, Eddie, you walked into a group of people that wasn't the first time we've sat down together in 5 years. That is something that, once a quarter. At this point, we aren't, once a quarter, but we're in regular communication. We're interacting and we're talking to those groups of people regularly. So, when you say stakeholders, it's anyone that a representative from anyone that receives our alert on what we would classify on like the internal side, meaning not the public or not message receivers downstream, but the people that are going to take our alert and either reissue it. So our transportation agencies that are putting it up on variable message signs on the highways, to our bridge authorities, to our partners down in New York City, Office of Emergency Management, whoever is going to be getting a notification from us and either reissuing or reposting or whatever. And then we, want to include those public-facing entities too. So the New York State Broadcasters Association, we're in regular contact with them. We have done our best at times to bring in member of the public to try to get their feedback, but that's on a separate kind of level than these committee meetings. But the idea is to stay in regular contact and bring up issues. So, we've had issues where our alerting regions weren't lining up well enough with the DOT regions. And so when we were activating and saying, hey, DOT, this is the region we've activated, can you please throw this information up on the highway sign? They then had to do a second process to try to realign and figure out what signs are going to be activated in this region. And it's having these regular meetings with those stakeholders where we can identify those issues, not at 3:00 in the morning when we're sending an alert, but, over lunch. We can say, okay, what can we do better when we send this alert to you so it's more useful for you to do what you need to do? So that has been such a key component to our programs. And I'm speaking on behalf of the state police as well, who again, I would, be lacking in saying that they are a key component and partnership, the two agencies working together in this field, everything we've done, they've been right there as well, doing it with us. Having that group together and hearing from both agencies that are activating alerts and working through those issues have kept, that relationship there, that if I have a question for New York City, I know who I'm going to pick up the phone and call. If I have a question for the broadcasters, or we run into an issue, we get feedback on an alert that, hey, this didn't go out this way, why? We know who we can contact to try to work through an issue. And so I think beyond the message templates and beyond the language and the, functionality of our alerts, the other major component that is necessary for us to be effective is this, are those stakeholders, are those committee members that are on regular contact as a group, whether it's the clearinghouse organizing it and having a discussion, or we've just seen in our meetings where two agencies that have nothing to do with missing person alerts have an opportunity where they're sitting down with each other and they have a conversation, after the fact about something they're dealing with on, let's say, disaster alerting. So it's been such a important part of the alert programs in New York, is to be able to have those committee members who are committed to staying in regular contact.
Yeah, walking into that first meeting and seeing people who had taken the train up from New York City
When
and
we say stake